The Senate Judiciary Committee hearing room was filled with a quiet intensity that only seemed to grow with each passing second. A large mahogany table stretched across the center, the senators seated on either side, their eyes focused, their pens ready. The walls, decorated with portraits of past justices, were an ironic reminder of the power and history contained within this room. It was an ordinary day, an ordinary hearing, but this time it would be different. At the front of the room, standing tall and composed, was Pam Bondi, former Attorney General of Florida. She adjusted her blue blazer and strode confidently to the podium, the sharp click of her heels echoing in the silent room. She was used to attention. Throughout her career, whether on the political stage or in the courtroom, she had always been a figure who commanded respect, and occasionally controversy. But today was different. Today, her voice would carry weight far beyond any ordinary political debate. The camera flashes illuminated her every step as she settled at the podium. Bondi had built her career on a reputation of toughness, an unflinching commitment to transparency, and an unwavering sense of justice. As Florida's first female attorney general, she had made a name for herself by taking on tough cases and standing firm in her beliefs, regardless of the political consequences. But today, she was here for a far more personal mission. Today, she wasn't just speaking as a former attorney general, she was speaking as a whistleblower, as someone who had uncovered a secret she believed the American people had a right to know. Across the room, seated in her usual calm, composed manner, was Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Barrett, the youngest Supreme Court justice in history, had risen to fame through her impressive legal career. A former Notre Dame law professor and judge on the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Seventh Circuit, Barrett had quickly become a conservative icon. Appointed to the Supreme Court in October 2020, following the death of Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, she had been confirmed through a tumultuous and highly polarized process. Her strict constructionist philosophy and religious beliefs had made her a lightning rod for political debate. Yet, despite the controversies that surrounded her appointment, Barrett had always maintained a careful, measured composure. Whether facing criticism from progressives or defending her views on the court, she had kept her emotions in check, presenting herself as a rock, a figure unwavering in her principles. But today, something was different. Today, she was about to face the very questions she had long avoided. "Thank you for allowing me to speak today," Bondi began, her voice strong and clear, cutting through the tension that filled the room. "I come before this committee with evidence that will change everything we thought we knew about Justice Barrett's appointment process." The words hung in the air, thick with implication. The room, which had been filled with the quiet hum of committee members shifting in their seats, fell utterly still. It was as if time itself had paused. Bondi reached into her briefcase, and from within, she pulled out a sealed folder, its red confidential stamp glaring under the fluorescent lights. The room leaned in. What was inside? What had Bondi uncovered that could possibly shake the very foundation of the Supreme Court? "This evidence," Bondi continued, her voice unwavering, "reveals a secret arrangement that occurred before Justice Barrett's confirmation. An arrangement that has never been disclosed to this committee or to the American people." At these words, Justice Barrett's expression, which had remained unreadable, seemed to crack, just for a moment. Her eyes widened slightly, and though she quickly regained her composure, those who were watching could see that the revelation was hitting her harder than she had expected. For a brief moment, the entire room seemed suspended in time. The committee members across both sides of the aisle leaned forward in their chairs, the shock and curiosity visible on their faces. Even the chairman, who had been prepared to moderate the hearing with his usual calmness, now found himself reaching for his gavel, though it was too late. The moment had arrived. Bondi placed the sealed folder on the table in front of her, the silence thickening around her like a storm cloud. She hadn't expected this to be easy. She hadn't expected to be at the center of such a firestorm. But she knew what she had uncovered was too important to ignore. This wasn't just about politics. This was about transparency, accountability, and the integrity of the highest court in the land. And she was ready to take on whatever came next. As the camera flashes continued to capture every movement, every word spoken, one thing was clear. Today was not an ordinary hearing. This was the beginning of a confrontation that could change everything. As the tension in the room grew palpable, Bondi stood unwavering, the weight of her words settling like a storm cloud above the committee. The senators, once engaged in quiet discussions and procedural notes, now watched with bated breath. The silence that followed her declaration was thick, the anticipation in the air almost suffocating. Bondi reached for the next document in her briefcase, a sense of purpose in her movements. The fate of the Supreme Court, and perhaps the future of American justice, rested on the next few minutes. The document she placed on the projector was a printed email exchange, dated just 3 days before Justice Barrett's nomination was officially announced. It was a simple communication, yet the implications were monumental. The email, carefully worded to avoid explicit details, outlined an understanding between Justice Barrett and 2 senior officials from the previous administration. The terms were not clear, but the language strongly suggested that certain legal positions had been discussed and assurances made. The very foundation of Barrett's confirmation was now being questioned. Bondi's voice cut through the silence. "This email," she said, her tone steady and deliberate, "shows a private arrangement regarding how Justice Barrett would handle specific legal cases once confirmed. The language in this communication strongly implies that she was given assurances about how she would rule on certain matters before ever taking the bench." Across the room, Justice Barrett's calm exterior remained intact, but the slight twitch in her hand, gripping the edge of the table, did not go unnoticed by those closest to her. Bondi continued, confident that the evidence she had was undeniable. "These assurances, ladies and gentlemen, indicate a breach of judicial ethics. If Justice Barrett entered into such an agreement, it would undermine the very principles upon which the Supreme Court stands." Senator Richard Blumenthal, visibly concerned, leaned forward. "Miss Bondi, these are serious allegations. Can you explain in specific terms what this arrangement entailed?" Bondi nodded, her eyes sharp as she pulled out another document, a calendar entry. The room grew even more still as she placed it on the projector, revealing the schedule for a private meeting between Justice Barrett and the 2 officials mentioned in the email. The meeting had been set for the day after the email exchange. "This calendar entry, members of the committee," Bondi said, pointing at the screen, "is the proof of the meeting that followed. It shows that this conversation went beyond mere confirmation discussions. It was a private agreement on how Barrett would approach critical legal cases." A murmur ran through the room. The committee was beginning to process the full weight of Bondi's claims, but some senators were hesitant. Senator Ted Cruz, ever the skeptic, quickly interjected. "Miss Bondi, a calendar entry does not prove any wrongdoing. Supreme Court nominees routinely meet with administration officials during the confirmation process. This doesn't show anything sinister." Bondi wasn't deterred. "Senator Cruz, I understand your skepticism," she said with calm conviction. "That's why I have a third piece of evidence to present, one that is far more significant." She reached into her folder and pulled out a memorandum. It was dated shortly after the meeting in question, and it was written by one of the officials who had participated in that meeting. The room fell silent as the document appeared on the screen. The memo summarized specific legal issues that would likely come before the court in the following term, along with the participants' perspectives on each issue. But most troubling of all, the memo outlined mutual commitments to ensure alignment on several controversial legal matters. "This memorandum," Bondi said, her voice rising slightly with urgency, "confirms the existence of the arrangement we've been discussing. It shows that Justice Barrett was not merely meeting with these officials for routine confirmation conversations. She was being promised alignment on key issues." The committee's reaction was instant. Senator Josh Hall, troubled by the contents of the document, turned to Barrett. "Justice Barrett, did this meeting happen as described in this memorandum? And if so, were commitments made about how you would rule on future cases?" Barrett took a deep breath before responding, her voice calm but tinged with tension. "Senator, I attended many meetings during the confirmation process. I do not recall the specific content of each meeting, but I can say with absolute certainty that no commitments were made to influence how I would rule on any future cases." Bondi pressed further, her voice steady but firm. "Justice Barrett, please look at page 3 of the memorandum. It specifically mentions your concerns about how these discussions might appear if made public." The room fell into a deeper silence as Barrett read the passage. The document claimed that Barrett had requested absolute confidentiality about certain aspects of the discussions, specifically because they were beyond the scope of traditional confirmation hearings. Senator Ted Cruz again attempted to redirect the focus. "Miss Bondi, suggesting impropriety based on a calendar entry and a memorandum is highly speculative." Bondi, however, was prepared for this. Senator Cruz, I understand your concern, which is why I had these documents analyzed by 2 independent forensic experts. These experts have verified their authenticity, and their findings are indisputable. The committee was stunned into silence. Bondi had presented her evidence with clarity, but the impact of what she had uncovered was only beginning to sink in. The tension in the room was unbearable as Bondi realized the truth. Her evidence had fallen apart. Despite her firm resolve, Barrett's calm defense had dismantled her claims piece by piece. The committee's decision was clear, but the impact of the day's events would linger far beyond the hearing room. Public trust in the Supreme Court was now shaken, and the question of its independence loomed larger than ever. In the end, the truth was clear. Sometimes the pursuit of justice requires more than just evidence. It requires unwavering integrity in the face of the truth.